2024年10月21日 ，Webbot 作者 Clif 上載咗一段 YouTube 片段，提及2009年嘅 Webbot 已經記錄咗一個重要嘅時間標記 Temporal Marker， 就係網台主持人 Joe Rogan 訪問作為總統候選人嘅特朗普。呢個係一個非常重要嘅指標，因為喺15年前嘅2009年，2012信息先至啱啱開始出現，而 Joe Rogan 嘅網台節目亦都係喺2009年12月先至開始。當時特朗普只係一名商人，以及真人 show 節目《飛黃騰達》嘅監製兼主持人，參與總統競選嘅機率幾乎等於零。因此，按照常理，呢個時間標記好難應驗。直到2024年10月26日，特朗普因為參與總統競選，出席 Joe Rogan 嘅網台節目 Joe Rogan Experience 接受訪問，作為宣傳戰嘅一環。所以2009年 Webbot 出現嘅呢一個時間標記，相隔15年之後先至應驗。
We have a temporal marker that originally showed up in the podcast thing in 2009. Okay, in 2009 it started shaping up as a temporal marker that would be almost impossible to miss should it ever arise. Okay. And that this temporal marker was going to be, as I couldn't get a word big enough, and Dick Allgaier reminded me in the interview that it was going to be basically iconic, and that's what it is. Okay, so the temporal marker that we're discussing here is a Rogan-Trump interview, right? Or Trump being interviewed by Rogan, or discussion, or however we want to talk about it, right? On the Joe Rogan podcast. So it's going to be a really cool temporal marker to observe, and a very important one, perhaps the most important one that I had ever had forecast in the data sets at that level. Okay, so that was 2009. We go to 2019, and Dick and I have our interview about it, but it doesn't happen at that time, right? Because the debate never happened. A pre-presidential election debate, right? Maybe it was 2020. So, but right in that time period. Okay, now it's 2024, and we have this same temporal marker of Trump and Rogan, but as a duo, right? Not as part of a debate, showing up. So we're back to the temporal marker, and they've now confirmed that they're going to do this.
更重要嘅係呢個時間標記並非單獨出現，而係扣連人類將進入科幻時代、外星人到嚟嘅世界。換言之，當特朗普接受 Joe Rogan 訪問，呢一個重要嘅時間標記出現之後，再相隔39日就會出現 UFO 嘅消息。Joe Rogan 嘅訪問上載於2024年10月26日，39日之後係2星期後嘅12月4日。呢一件足以震撼人類，甚至改變世界歷史同人類命運嘅大事，喺未來100年後嘅人回望嘅時候，會發現人類進入科幻世界嘅起始點，正係呢一個訪問。
After the Joe Rogan interview, in our data back in 2009, and it was confirmed before, and it was one of the reasons I did it. It was confirmed before I commissioned the remote viewing guys to have a look, right? I wanted confirmation of what we were seeing. I mean, I don't follow politics. At the time that all this was going on in 2009, Trump was not even a figure in any of this. And Joe Rogan was, but he wasn't like a big major thing, right? So I didn't have any hooks and any personalities involved. It was just two cutouts, just two placeholders, two variables for me. You know, what turned out to be a podcaster and the President of the United States that were just going to blow the whole thing wide open. The reason that this is the case is because that TM had a lot to do with the UFO discussion, right? And the secret technology and all of this. That's why in the data sets, it became such a standout, such an iconic temporal marker, was because it appears just ahead of sci-fi world starting to manifest. And it is such that 100 years from now, people can go back and look at this video, look at the interview itself, and know that that was the absolute threshold being crossed as we move into sci-fi world. Okay, so that's set up aside. So I'm talking with Igor, and he reminded me this. And to be honest, I'd totally spaced on it. But that was the reason that I had contacted Dick Allgeier and his remote viewing guys was because we'd had that melee thing back in 2009, and in I think probably about 2015, maybe it started really picking up again, and I'll describe that in a second. And so I was prompted to get hold of Dick Allgeier as like sort of a sanity check on what I was seeing. Anyway, and so we had this situation within the data in 2009 that had been reinforced over the years from 2009 through to 2015 that said that 39 days after this TM took place, we would have and this is where Igor and I did our fighting, we would have this visible contention that would dissolve into a melee. And at the time, and even in our conversations here recently, he wanted to say, and I'll title this way in honor of Igor here, but he wanted to say that it was 39 days to melee, which is a catchy phrase. Okay, it'd be a nice title for a book or something. But in my opinion, it's not quite accurate, right? Because we don't know what the distance is between the organized visible contention that then degrades into the melee. That might be months for all we know. But what we do have some justification for suggesting is that there will be 39 days between the temporal marker of the Trump interview and the appearance of this visible contention. And we're not talking people taking on migrant gangs that are taking over apartment buildings. That kind of visible contention may well be in there, but the stuff that had been motivating me to get hold of Dick Allgeier was the visible contention between space aliens. Okay, so, or whatever, right? Alien reproduction vehicles or whatever. Who knows what's going on? Because we can't validate any of it at this point, right? So we're going to have these, some kind of weird confrontation, visible contention, which we could probably call in term combat, in the skies that will show up, and it'll show up at a predictable point, which is probably something over a month, and we'll put down 30 days, or 39 days, something over a month after the temporal marker of Trump and Rogan. And that's just the beginning of all of this, right? So in my understanding of what we were looking at back in 2009, and I can't refresh because again we weren't able to keep any of that data. We ended up with a situation where, in my opinion, melee may be a couple of months past the visible contention point. The visible contention will go on, not continuously necessarily, maybe intermittently, and maybe sporadically in terms of where it's located. And then it will degenerate in one of these combat episodes or combat encounters into a melee. And in this sense, we may also find that at that period of time, just coincidentally, we got political chaos, and because we may be talking January, and we may end up with a melee itself on the ground, as above, so below kind of thing, right? But the melee in the skies was what was being forecast in 2009. Again, this is all part of a large set that was dominated by this temporal marker as the iconic threshold that you step up into to get into sci-fi world. And so we'll be having our entrance into sci-fi world here. Okay, so, all right, so that's our basic subject number one, right? Bear in mind you need to keep your proximity alarms ready, ready to go off, that kind of thing. It's going to be quite chaotic for these next while. And also bear in mind that the conditions that create melee all come down to the lack of control. No longer any kind of ability to transmit information from command to the troops in the field, right? So I'm expecting that we may be participating in causing those events. But whose he was, it's up here in this visible contention that then actually creates the melee situation by taking all of the UFOs that are now gathered around here for whatever their purposes are and disconnecting them from their main headquarters inadvertently. So there's a lot of complexity in this.